3 weeks after I buried my husband, Cassius, my son slid a contribution sheet next to my coffee cup. "You have to earn your stay here," Roderick said, his voice holding the same smooth, reasonable tone he used with his clients. I did not look at the paper. I looked at the coffee. It was a good dark roast Cassius had loved, from a little shop over on Parish Street. The steam rose in a slow, steady column in the morning light, slanting through the kitchen window. The house was quiet. It had been quiet for 21 days, a thick, insulating silence that felt heavier than sound. I'd been living inside that silence, wrapped in it like a shroud. Roderick cleared his throat. "Mama, it's just a formality for the household accounts. Imani and I, we just want to make sure everything is transparent and above board. Now that, well, now that things are different." I lifted my gaze from the coffee mug, a heavy ceramic thing Cassius had bought me from a potter in Seagrove years ago, and looked at my son. 45 years old, my only child from a marriage that had ended before he could form memories of it. He had his father's height, but my eyes. He wore a charcoal gray quarter-zip sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. His expression was one of careful, practiced concern. It was a look I knew well. It was the face he put on before asking for something. I didn't say anything. I simply watched him. I watched the slight flicker in his left eye, the way his fingers drummed a silent, impatient rhythm on the polished granite of the island. Behind him, his wife, Imani, moved into the doorway, wiping her hands on a linen dish towel. She offered a small, sympathetic smile. "Feely," she said, her voice soft as felt. "Roddy's just trying to make this transition easier on you. We don't want you to have to worry about a thing. This just organizes it all, so we can take care of everything. Grief makes people very easy to persuade. It hollows you out, leaving a space that is desperate to be filled with direction, with purpose, with anything other than the vast, echoing emptiness of loss." They were counting on that. They saw the hollow space in me and thought it was a vacancy. I finally looked down at the paper. It was a single sheet, professionally printed. Household Contribution and Asset Subordination Agreement. A neat table had 3 columns: occupant, contribution, and schedule of assets. My name, Ophelia Tatum Bouchard, was typed under occupant. The contribution field was blank, waiting for a number, but it was the 3rd column that made the air in my lungs feel thin and cold. It requested a full schedule of personal assets to be appended. "I see," I said. My voice sounded distant, as if it were coming from the other side of the room. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The liquid was hot, and the heat was a small, grounding anchor in the sudden chill that had entered the kitchen. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply held their gaze, first Roderick's, then Imani's, and then I pushed the paper back toward the center of the island with one finger. "I'll need to think about it," I said. And in that moment, I knew this was not about earning my stay in the house I now shared with them. It was about something else entirely. Something I could not yet see, but which I could feel. The way an underwriter feels the hidden risk in a policy, a subtle imbalance in the numbers that speaks of a foundational crack. My life with Cassius had been a late and unexpected gift. I had been divorced for nearly 20 years when we met, my work as an insurance underwriter for a large tobacco warehouse firm in Durham being the central pillar of my life. Roderick was already at Hampton, his tuition a monthly check I wrote with a steady hand. My world was orderly, predictable, and quiet. Then Cassius Bouchard, a widower who taught architectural history at North Carolina Central, sat next to me at a community meeting about historical preservation in the Haiti district. He spoke with a quiet passion about the legacy of Black-owned businesses, about the importance of foundations, both literal and metaphorical. He had hands that knew how to build things, and a laugh that made the world feel right. We married when I was 56. He moved into my small house, and for 12 years, we built a life that was as sturdy and beautiful as the oak furniture he sometimes refinished in his workshop. We had our routines, buttermilk biscuits on Sundays, with the gospel station playing softly from the kitchen radio. Evenings on the screened-in porch, listening to Bill Withers and the distant hum of traffic on the Durham freeway. He had a portfolio of commercial properties, 7 parcels in and around the Research Triangle that he'd bought quietly over 30 years. It was his life's work, his own private project in legacy building. He called it his Acorn Fund. He never talked specifics, only the philosophy behind it. You buy good dirt in the path of progress, Feely, he'd say, and you hold it. You don't get fancy. When he got sick, the decline was swift, a powerful current that pulled him away from me faster than I could comprehend. In the final weeks, Roderick and Imani had insisted I move in with them. Their house was larger, newer, with no stairs to navigate. "It's too much for you, Mama, rattling around in that old place," Roderick had said, his hand on my shoulder. "Let us take care of you." It seemed like the sensible thing to do, the kind thing. Grief had blinded me to the transaction. I had moved out of my home and into their guest suite, a beautifully appointed room that had never once felt like my own. The day after the contribution sheet appeared on the kitchen island, a long black sedan I didn't recognize pulled into Roderick's driveway. A woman emerged, tall and composed, in a charcoal gray suit that spoke of quiet authority. She carried a leather portfolio. I watched her from the living room window as she walked up the stone pathway. Imani answered the door. There were a few moments of hushed conversation before she came to find me. "Feely, there's a Miss Whitfield Boateng here to see you. She says she was Cassius's attorney." Imani's perfectly sculpted eyebrows were drawn together in a mask of concerned confusion. "Do you want me to stay? I can handle it for you if you're not up to it." "No, thank you, Imani," I said, rising from the armchair. "I'll see her in the library." The library was Cassius's one condition for our marriage. He had to have a room for his books. In my old house, we'd converted a bedroom. In Roderick's sprawling new build, the library was more of a showcase. Mahogany-paneled walls, leather-bound sets of books that looked untouched, and a fireplace that had never been used. It was a cold room. Marvella Whitfield Boateng stood by the window, her back to me, looking out at the manicured lawn. She turned as I entered, and her expression was one of deep professional sympathy. She was a handsome woman, my age perhaps, with silver threading her elegantly styled hair. "Mrs. Bouchard?" she said, her voice a warm contralto. She extended a hand. "I'm Marvella Whitfield Boateng. I'm so very sorry for your loss. Cassius was a wonderful man. I had the privilege of serving as his counsel for over 20 years. Please, call me Feely," I said, taking her hand. Her grip was firm and dry. "Thank you for coming." "Of course. I would have come sooner, but Cassius left very specific instructions. He asked that I wait until 3 weeks had passed. He said you would need the time." She gestured to the 2 leather armchairs by the cold fireplace. "May we?" We sat. The leather sighed under our weight. The room smelled of wood polish and Imani's expensive potpourri. "Cassius was a meticulous man," Marvella began, opening her portfolio. "He believed in planning. He wanted his affairs to cause you as little burden as possible. His will is straightforward. With the exception of a few small bequests to the university, his entire estate passes to you. You are the sole beneficiary." I nodded slowly. We had discussed this, Cassius and I, on one of those long evenings on the porch. "It's all for you, Feely," he'd said. You gave me the best years of my life. The very least I can do is make sure yours are secure. The estate includes his personal effects, his savings, and his portfolio of commercial holdings, Marvella continued. She slid a thin, bound document across the polished table between us. This is a schedule of the properties, 7 parcels in total. Their assessed value is considerable. I looked at the cover. The Cassius Bouchard Commercial Portfolio. I didn't open it. Marvella paused, her eyes searching mine. He also left this for you. She retrieved a thick, cream-colored envelope from her portfolio. It was sealed with a wax stamp bearing the letter B. My name was written on the front in Cassius's familiar, elegant script. His instructions were that I was to deliver this to you personally, and only to you. He said you would know what to do with it. I took the envelope. The paper was heavy, expensive. It felt warm from her portfolio. My thumb traced the shape of his handwriting. For a moment, my throat tightened, and the room seemed to blur at the edges. I placed it on the table next to the portfolio schedule. Is there anything else? I asked, my voice a little rough. Just one thing, she said, her tone shifting slightly, becoming more focused. The estate is now in probate. There is a standard inventory window. In North Carolina, it's typically quite swift. From the date of filing, we have about 19 days left to ensure all assets are correctly recorded under your name. It's a formality, but a crucial one. I will handle all the filings. You don't need to worry about the details. She stood, gathering her things. Feely, if you need anything at all, or if any questions arise, anything that feels out of place, please do not hesitate to call me. Cassius was very clear. My primary responsibility is to you. The emphasis she placed on that last sentence was subtle but unmistakable. It was a signal. I am on your side. I stood and walked her to the door. As she was leaving, I saw Roderick in the hallway, pretending to be occupied with the mail on a console table. His gaze flickered from Marvella to me and back again. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Later that evening, after a silent dinner where Roderick and Imani exchanged tense, furtive glances, I took the envelope and the portfolio schedule to my room. The guest suite was immaculate, decorated in shades of gray and beige, a hotel room in the heart of the house. I sat in the armchair by the window, the heavy vellum of the envelope cool against my fingertips. I opened the portfolio first. The schedule was simple: 7 addresses, parcel identification numbers, and the date of acquisition. They were all in Durham and Wake counties, familiar arteries of the Triangle: Alston Avenue, Fayetteville Street, a plot near the old Chesterfield factory, another just off Highway 54 toward Chapel Hill. Good dirt in the path of progress. The final page was a summary appraisal from 6 months prior. I stared at the number at the bottom of the page. My breath caught in my chest. It was a staggering figure, an amount of money that felt more like a concept than a reality. $30 million. My hand trembled slightly as I put the schedule down. I had known Cassius was comfortable, that he had done well, but I had no idea of the scale. He had lived so simply, his pleasures found in good wood, good music, and good company. This wealth, this paper empire, was something he had built in silence, a quiet testament to his foresight. Then I opened his letter. Inside was a single sheet of the same cream-colored paper. His message was short. My dearest Feely, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am sorry to have left you. These have been the best years of my life. Enclosed is a key. It opens my old safety deposit box at the Mechanics and Farmers Bank downtown, the one I kept before we met. Inside, you will find all the original deeds and my personal files on the properties. Marvella has the legal authority, But you have the history. You know this city better than anyone. Trust your instincts. You've spent a lifetime pricing risk. Do it one more time for us. All my love. Cassius taped to the bottom of the letter was a small brass key. A key to a history I never knew he had. My eyes burned, but no tears came. The grief was a dry, heavy thing. I folded the letter and put it, along with the key, into the pocket of my robe. Then I picked up the property schedule again. I read through the list of addresses a second time, more slowly now. My mind, sluggish with sorrow, began to stir. The gears began to turn, stiffly at first, then with gathering momentum. An underwriter's mind never really retires. It's a way of seeing the world, a constant, low-level hum of assessment. You look at a building, and you don't just see bricks and mortar. You see wiring, plumbing, fire suppression systems, liability exposure, the integrity of the foundation. One of the addresses leapt out at me. 418 East Pettigrew Street. It was a warehouse, a long, low brick building in the shadow of the freeway. I knew that building. I had underwritten the commercial liability policy on it myself, back in 2003. I remembered it clearly. It was part of a package for a holding company out of Charlotte. I could almost feel the heft of the file in my hands, smell the dusty paper of the inspector's report. But Cassius hadn't bought it until 2009, according to the schedule. And suddenly, I understood something. This wasn't just a list of assets. It was a map. And it was a map of a place I already knew intimately, not as a wife, but as a professional. The ground beneath my feet, which had felt so unstable since Cassius's passing, began to feel a little more solid. It was a terrain I understood. The next morning, I found the contribution sheet lying where I had left it on the kitchen island, a silent, persistent demand. Roderick was at the counter, scrolling through his phone, a cup of coffee at his elbow. "Morning, Mama," he said without looking up. "Good morning, Roderick," I replied. I poured myself a cup of coffee, my movements deliberate. "I had a visit from Cassius's attorney yesterday." He finally looked up. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "Oh, everything in order?" "It seems so," I said, leaning against the counter opposite him. "She mentioned the estate is in probate. There's an inventory period." 19 days, she said. A flicker of something, annoyance, crossed his face before it was replaced by the familiar mask of solicitous concern. "Right. It's a lot of paperwork. That's why Imani and I thought this," he tapped the agreement, "would be helpful. We can consolidate everything, manage the assets for you. You shouldn't have to be dealing with lawyers and filings in your state." "My state?" I asked quietly. "Well, you know, grieving." He said the word as if it were a diagnosis, a disqualifying condition. "The last thing you need is financial stress on top of the emotional stress. Let us carry that burden for you. That's what family is for." "The agreement mentions subordinating my assets into a holding company," I said, keeping my tone conversational. "What holding company would that be?" He hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Oh, just our family LLC. It's for tax efficiency, standard practice. It simplifies things, protects you." "Protects me from what?" He gave a short, indulgent laugh. "From everything, Mama. Liability, creditors, market fluctuations. It's what I do for a living. I protect people's assets." He stood up and rinsed his cup in the sink, his back to me. "Look, just sign it. Imani can notarize it for you this afternoon. The sooner we get it filed, the sooner we can get everything organized and you can just rest." Apparently, ambition works both ways. My ambition had been to see him secure, successful. I had paid his Hampton tuition without a second thought. I had taken $10,000 from my own retirement savings to seed his first boutique fund back in 2011, a gesture of faith in the brilliant son I had raised. His ambition, it seemed, had grown beyond that. I didn't answer him. I just took my coffee and walked out to the sunroom. I needed to call my sister friend, Loretta. Loretta and I had known each other for 50 years. We met as young women, the only two black tellers at a downtown bank, in an era when that was still a novelty. She had gone on to become a bank examiner, a woman who could read a balance sheet like a poet reads a verse, finding the story hidden in the numbers. She was retired now, living over in Chapel Hill, spending her days gardening and spoiling her grandchildren. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Feely. I was just thinking about you, honey. How are you holding up? I'm holding, Loretta, I said. I'm holding. Listen, can I ask you a professional question? A hypothetical. You can ask me anything you want. Shoot. Let's say there's an estate, I began, choosing my words with care. And the primary asset is a collection of commercial properties. And let's say the sole beneficiary is a recent widow. If someone wanted to manage those properties for her, what would be the quickest way to gain control of them? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of wind chimes. Quickest way? Loretta's voice lost its gentle, social cadence and took on the sharp, analytical edge I knew so well. You'd want to get them into an LLC before the estate inventory closes. You'd have the beneficiary sign a transfer or subordination agreement, making the LLC the managing entity. Once the properties are in the LLC, whoever controls the LLC controls the properties. They could be leveraged, sold, refinanced, anything. And it would be perfectly legal, provided the beneficiary signed the paperwork. Why are you asking, Feely? A cold knot formed in my stomach. Roderick has asked me to sign something, a household contribution agreement. It has a clause about asset subordination. The silence on the other end was long and heavy. The wind chimes tinkled again, a cheerful sound at odds with the gravity of the moment. Feely, Loretta said finally, her voice low and serious. Do not sign a single thing, not one blessed thing. Who is the executor of Cassius's will? His attorney, a woman named Marvella Whitfield Boateng. Good, that's very good. Now, you listen to me. This LLC, do you know its name? He just called it their family LLC. Okay, here's what you do. Go online to your bank account, the one you share with Roderick and Imani for household expenses. Look at the transaction history. Look at everything. Wires, transfers, payments. You're looking for a name, a corporate entity. And Feely? Look for any requests for wire transfer instructions. If they're planning on moving money, they might have already started the process. Why would they do that? Because moving assets takes time. They might be getting the paperwork in place, so the moment you sign, they can act. Grief makes people trusting, Feely. And debt makes people desperate. We talked for a few more minutes, her calm, practical voice a lifeline. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, the phone heavy in my lap. Then I went to my room, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. It didn't take long to find it. Imani was meticulous. She handled their finances. I scrolled through the recent activity, past the grocery bills and utility payments, and then I saw it. An outbound email confirmation from the bank's secure messaging center, dated 2 days ago. The subject line was Wire Transfer Instructions Request. I clicked on it. The message was from Imani, addressed to a commercial officer at the bank. Good morning, Michael. Per our conversation, please forward standard wire instructions for our holding company, R&I Capital Ventures, LLC. We anticipate receiving a significant asset transfer in the coming weeks and want to ensure the account is prepared. Thank you, Imani Bouchard. R&I Capital Ventures. Roderick and Imani. My blood ran cold. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see it, written in the cool, impersonal font of a bank confirmation. They hadn't just planned it. They had started. They were so certain I would sign that they were already preparing the destination for my inheritance. Cassius's legacy. That afternoon, while Imani was at her yoga class and Roderick was on a conference call in his home office, I drove downtown. The Mechanics and Farmers Bank on West Parish Street stood as it had for generations, a proud brick cornerstone of Black Wall Street. It felt right, coming here. Cassius would have approved. I used the key from his letter. The bank manager, a kind woman named Mrs. Evans, led me to a small private viewing room. She placed the long metal box on the velvet-lined table and left, closing the door softly behind her. The box was heavy. Inside, it was packed with manila folders, each one neatly labeled in Cassius's hand. There was a folder for each of the 7 properties. I lifted out the file for 418 East Pettigrew Street. It contained the original deed, title insurance paperwork, and a stack of his personal notes on yellow legal pads. But tucked in the back was something else. A folded, brittle document. I carefully unfolded it. It was a copy of the underwriting summary I had prepared in 2003. My own signature was at the bottom, clear as day. Ophelia Tatum. My name before I married Cassius. My professional self. There was a sticky note attached in Cassius's handwriting. Saw your work long before I saw your face. Knew you were thorough. A wave of dizziness washed over me. He must have gotten this during his due diligence when he bought the property. He had seen my work. He had known, all this time, the depth of my professional experience. He hadn't just left me his wealth, he had left me the tools to protect it, trusting that the woman he married was still, somewhere inside, the underwriter who priced risk for a living. I spent an hour in that small room, going through each file. Each one told a story of his patience and his vision. He had bought land when it was forgotten, buildings when they were neglected, always in the path of the city's inevitable growth. It was a masterclass in quiet, steady wealth creation, and it was all mine. A legacy, a responsibility. As I was packing the box to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Roderick. "Mama, where are you? Imani's back and was hoping you could sign that paper before dinner." I took a deep breath. It was time, but not on his terms, on mine. That evening, I was in the library when they came to find me. I had asked them to join me there. I was sitting in one of the leather armchairs, the one Marvella had used. On the table in front of me, I had arranged several documents in a neat line. The contribution agreement was on the far left. Roderick and Imani entered, their expressions a careful blend of concern and impatience. Imani was holding a notary stamp in her hand. "Mama, you had us worried," Roderick said, trying for a light tone. "You shouldn't be out driving by yourself right now." "I'm fine, Roderick," I said. My voice was even. "I went to the bank." "The bank?" Imani asked, her smile tightening at the edges. "Is everything all right? Did you need cash?" "I needed to visit Cassius's safety deposit box," I said. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. "Please, sit down." They exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance, then sat on the sofa opposite me. They looked like a portrait of success. Beautiful, well-dressed, confident. "I've been thinking about your proposal," I began, gesturing to the paper on the table. "This household contribution agreement. I wanted to understand it better." Roderick leaned forward, his professional demeanor clicking into place. "Of course, Mama. It's simple, really. We just need to establish your contribution to the household expenses. And to do that, we need a schedule of your assets. The subordination clause is just to allow us to manage those assets efficiently within our holding company, R&I Capital Ventures. It protects you. I see, I said. And what are the assets you were planning to manage? He shrugged, a casual gesture that didn't quite land. Well, whatever Cassius left you. Your home? Any savings? We can make it all work for you. Generate income. You won't have to worry about a thing. You mean the properties? I said. It was not a question. His composure wavered for a second. Yes, the properties would be the main component. They're not liquid. They need active management. That's what I do. I know what you do, Roderick, I said softly. I reached forward and slid the second document from the pile toward them. It was the portfolio schedule Marvella had given me, open to the summary appraisal page. The $30 million figure was facing them. Imani's intake of breath was sharp and audible. Roderick stared at the number, his face paling slightly. The mask of calm concern was gone, replaced by a raw, naked avarice. He couldn't hide it. $30 million, I said, my voice still quiet. That's a considerable portfolio to manage. Mama, this is more than we thought, Roderick stammered, his eyes glued to the paper. This makes it even more important that it's handled professionally. You can't deal with this on your own. You shouldn't be reading paperwork in this state, Mama, Imani added, her voice regaining some of its feigned softness, but it was brittle now. It's overwhelming. You're right, I said. It is overwhelming, which is why I've been trying to understand it. I picked up the next item from my neat row of evidence. It was a printout of the email confirmation for the wire transfer instructions. I placed it on top of the appraisal. R&I Capital Ventures, I read aloud. We anticipate receiving a significant asset transfer in the coming weeks. It seems you were very confident I would sign your agreement, Imani. Imani's face drained of all color. She looked at Roderick, her eyes wide with panic. Roderick stared at the printout, his mouth opening and closing silently. The smooth, confident fund manager had vanished, replaced by a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. That's just preparatory. He finally managed to say, standard procedure. We were just getting things in place to help you. To help me, I repeated. The words felt like stones in my mouth. Or to help yourself, Roderick. I know you took a big loss last quarter. I know what a margin call is. I may be grieving, but I am not stupid. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. And there's just one more thing, I said. I reached for the last document. It was the brittle, yellowed copy of my own underwriting report from 2003 for the property at 418 East Pettigrew Street. I unfolded it carefully and placed it on the very top of the pile. My signature, Ophelia Tatum, was clearly visible at the bottom. Before I was Cassius's wife, before I was your mother, I was an underwriter, I said, my voice clear and steady. For 36 years, I spent my days pricing risk on commercial holdings right here in the Triangle. I know these properties, Roderick, not just as a name on a schedule. I know their foundations. I know their liabilities. I know their value. I leaned back in the chair. The truth was laid out on the table between us, undeniable and complete. There were no more explanations to be made, no more lies to be told. Roderick stared at my signature on that old document. He looked from the paper to my face, and for the first time, I think he truly saw me. Not as his aging, grieving mother who needed to be managed, but as the woman who had underwritten the very assets he was trying to take. The foundation of his plan had just crumbled to dust. He slumped back against the sofa, the fight gone out of him. He looked smaller, younger, defeated. Imani stood up abruptly. I I think I'll go make some tea, she whispered, and fled the room. I was alone with my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the papers on the table, a monument to his failed scheme. 19 days, I said quietly. That was the window, wasn't it? Get my signature, subordinate the assets to your LLC before the estate inventory closed. Once they were in your company, you could have leveraged them to cover your margin call. No one would have been the wiser. He said nothing. He just rubbed his forehead, a gesture of profound weariness. I paid for your education at Hampton, I said, my voice devoid of accusation, a simple statement of fact. I gave you the seed money for your first fund. I did it because I believed in you. I thought I had raised a man of character, like Cassius. At the mention of his name, a single tear traced a path down Roderick's cheek. It was the first genuine emotion I had seen from him in weeks. I'm in trouble, Mama, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Real trouble. I know, I said, and I did. I understood the pressure, the fear of failure that drives people to do things they never thought they would. I understood it, but I could not excuse it. Compassion and consequence are not mutually exclusive. I reached forward, gathered the 4 documents into a single pile, and then, very deliberately, I picked up the Household Contribution and Asset Subordination Agreement. I tore it in half, then in quarters, then in eighths, and let the pieces fall onto the polished surface of the table. They looked like snowflakes on dark wood. The properties will be recorded in my name, I said. Marvella Whitfield Boateng is handling the filings. Your margin call is your own to manage. He finally looked at me, his eyes full of a despair that was terrible to witness. What am I going to do? I don't know, Roderick, I said, and the honesty of it was a heavy weight in the room. I truly don't know. I stood up and left him there, sitting in the cold, perfect library, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. The weeks that followed were a blur of legalities. Marvella was as good as her word, a calm and efficient presence who guided me through the complexities of the estate transfer. The 7 parcels, Cassius's legacy, were formally and securely recorded in my name. Roderick and Imani were ghosts in their own home. We moved around each other in a silence thick with all the things that could never be unsaid, never be undone. I stayed until the paperwork was finalized, and then I moved back to my own house, the one Cassius and I had shared. The silence there was different. It was a peaceful silence, filled not with absence, but with memory. The house welcomed me back. It smelled of old books and lemon oil, and the faint, lingering scent of Cassius's pipe tobacco. I spent the first few days just sitting on the porch, letting the familiar rhythms of the neighborhood wash over me. The sound of children playing down the street, the easy greetings of neighbors trading pole beans and tomatoes over the chain-link fence, the low rumble of the number 12 bus heading down Fayetteville Street. I lost a son. I have to be honest about that. The boy I raised, the man I thought I knew, was gone. Perhaps he was never really there, or perhaps he was, and he simply got lost along the way. Grief is a strange and complicated country, and I am still learning its geography. But in losing him, I found a part of myself I thought I had left behind, the sharp, analytical woman who could see the cracks in any foundation. Cassius left me more than money. He left me a purpose. About a month after I moved back home, I had lunch with Marvella. I told her my idea. I wanted to use the income from the properties to honor the legacy Cassius cared so much about. We established the Haiti Heritage Fund. It's a small business loan circle, providing low-interest capital to Black entrepreneurs here in Durham, people with good ideas who just need a little help building their own foundations. I sit on the board. We review the applications. I read their business plans the way I used to read insurance policies, looking for the solid structure, the manageable risk, the potential for growth. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in those meetings, listening to a young baker describe her plans for a new pastry shop, or a young man lay out his vision for a community-focused tech company, I feel Cassius there with me. He's smiling, I think. We are tending his acorns, helping them grow into mighty oaks. My life is quiet now, but it is my own. The buttermilk biscuits still get made on Sundays. Bill Withers still plays low on the porch radio. The risk has been priced. The foundation is secure.